Hey, Pa. Um, Normally on Sundays I'm all nice and dressed up, but I'm still getting over my the biggest birthday gift I've been given, which was the head cold that my wife gave me. So, to not further infect everyone in the neighborhood, I'm sticking around like this. Hey, what's really funny is I checked my email and I found out that Charlotte Barnes, wife of Jonah Barnes, commented on my video. She said she was so glad that I was enjoying Jonah's book. That was awesome. Like, I love seeing her on Ward Radio, and I love seeing Jonah on Ward Radio. They're all so great. I didn't expect my videos to be seen by anybody other than my family, but it's so great. I think that they're so cool. They are so cool. But I'm really enjoying it, and I really love Jonah's humor. And later on today, I'm going to start getting into the bonus content with the QR codes, because that'll be fun. It's always been amazing. I really like what they've been doing at Plain and Precious Publishing, how they review the material afterwards and discuss it to get into more little details and tangents that they couldn't get otherwise stuffed into the text of the book. Oof, it's good stuff, good stuff. And especially how Jonah finished chapter 1 with such rebellious statements. That was so great. But now we're on chapter 2, elucidating Lucifer. So let's continue there. So chapter 2, elucidating Lucifer. I am no devil, for there is none. See 2 Nephi 28:22 for that reference. TLDR, unlike the Old Testament, the brass plates contain clear and detailed doctrine surrounding 1. The former station of Satan, 2. Satan's divine parentage, 3. The timing of the devil's rebellion and his fall, 4. The evil army of the devil's angels, 5. Satan's vengeful crusade against all mankind, 6. Lucifer's new identity as Satan, the father of lies, 7. Satan posing as an angel of light after the expulsion, and 8. Satan's power over those who rebelled. Dude, this one's going to be great. This is a subject that's fascinating to me, only because there is a lot of thought that I have behind it, especially the idea that Satan's name also just means accuser. I don't know how much he's going to get into stuff, but I'm sure I'm going to have a bunch of tangents on this. But to me, the motivation behind what he did and why is another important thing that I ponder on all the time, because that's a question that comes up. In fact, I was talking with Laylee and her friend, and that was one of the questions that they had together, was like, why would Satan be punished if he was just doing what had been done at other times? And it's like, well, let's think about it. So anyways, I'll get onto those tangents later. Let's see what Jonah has to say. Let's get the purpose of getting the brass plates together, then I can go off on tangents. All right. A story is only as good as its villain, and the villain of the traditional canon is decidedly... Sorry, that's really funny. Let me read it again. A story is only as good as its villain, and the villain of the traditional canon is decidedly lame. No wonder Satan has such an easy time convincing people that he doesn't actually exist. What opposition does the traditional canon offer? According to Genesis, Satan is just an annoying trickster who gets a stone rolling that eventually causes trouble. Satan interferes with Eve and Job. Then he's gone until 3,000 years later when Jesus goes fasting in the wilderness in Matthew 4. And Jesus defeats the devil with one hand tied behind his back. The biblical Satan is irksome, aloof, and detached, not a great nemesis to sit opposite the Almighty. Isaiah says, one day we'll look upon Satan with incredulity and ask, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake the kingdoms? That's Isaiah 14:16. Perhaps our surprise will be the fault of the canonizers who censored the extent of Satan's nefarious tower. power, in the old context of the Old Testament alone. It sounds like Isaiah is exaggerating because the Bible doesn't set up Satan as the great opponent of the Creator. The canon does precisely what Satan wants by offering little defense against his propaganda. I am no devil, for there is none. And thus he whispered in their ears. That's 2 Nephi 28:22. He's got a nice footnote for the next two. Okay. The traditional Bible is light on Lucifer and soft on Satan. It's a can of diet devil. The Old Testament only mentions the word devil 4 times, and each of those is talking about devils in the general sense. The New Testament does better, mentioning the devil almost 100 times. The word Satan appears 15 times in the Old Testament, with 11 of those mentions in the book of Job. Whoa! That is a dearth of the devil. Wow. The New Testament authors give Satan 34 mentions and use the word adversary once. The complete absence of the devil from the Old Testament has led some scholars to conclude that for Judaism, in the beginning, there was no Satan, and theorized that the doctrine was cooked up by Christians. Really? Okay, and here's the footnote for this one. This is from Pagels, The Origin of Satan. Pagels argues that the absence of Satan before the Gospels means that the early Christians must have invented him as a minority sect's rhetorical strategy, a way of defining and asserting itself. The Devil Problem, New Yorker Magazine, April 3rd, 1995. He accessed it online. And Pagels is not a unique opinion. That is interesting. Maybe that's why, despite 81% of Americans saying they believe in God, 59% believe there is a devil. See, Brennan Magan's Belief in the 5 Spiritual Entities edges down to new lows in Gallup region, July 20th, 2023. Ooh. That means a huge chunk of Christians believe in a God with no opposition. Yeah, 81 to nearly 60. I mean, it's 59%. That's a 22% difference. That's not as surprising as I think it should be. And I'll tell you why in a moment when it gets to the next section. This means a huge chunk of Christians believe in God with no opposition. Don't be too surprised when Pew Research asked in an open-ended question what one word best describes the Mormon religion. The most common response was cult. See Views of the Mormon Religion, Pew Research, Religion and Politics, November 23rd, 2011. So these aren't the brightest respondents, let's just say. The truth is that if you were trying to build a satanic cult, as anti-Mormon author Gerald Tanner calls the LDS Church, then you... Oh, really? So he calls the LDS Church a satanic cult? But isn't Tanner the last name of... Tanner sounds like a prominent name for... He must have been part of the church. I'm thinking what's his name? R. Tanner? L.N. Tanner? It sounds like an apostle's name or something from the past. I can't recall. N. Eldon Tanner? Does that ring a bell? Anyways, I'm wondering if they're related. But he's an anti-Mormon author, calls the LDS Church a satanic cult. Then you wouldn't want to be anywhere near the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon won't shut up about the devil from start to finish. From Nephi's apocalypse in 1 Nephi 14 to Mormon's farewell warnings in Moroni 9, if warning everyone about Satan is Satan's strategy, then he's too stupid to worry about. But if the Book of Mormon is true, then we should be far more concerned about the devil than the Old Testament tells us to be. But why does the Book of Mormon warn about the devil when the Old Testament is busy with Baal or golden calves? Why are Lehi's descendants so unlike their old world cousins? Whence comes this fear of someone who was a minor character anciently? The answer, Satan's story gets passed to the Book of Mormon from the Josephite plates. Now this is interesting. Sorry. All right, so we're on to the next section. And this is actually a very good and important part. I can verify that there tends to be two opposing feelings, I guess, is the best way to put it, in the church about Satan and the adversary. Like, I have seen women and girls in the church, like when I was really young, I was down in Cedar City going to that one semester at George Wythe that, well, George Wythe didn't work out at all, but it was a good experience. And also when I was in like singles wards, where some really dive into the, oh, Satan's after me, dark spirits, being oppressed, that kind of thing. And some of these girls were really, like, I can remember two examples where one girl, it was really weird. I got this really weird vibe that she was a victim of quite a few things. But the vibe that I got was that she was giving off the vibe of a victim so much that anyone who would be a predator would go, she's the one to go for. And it was really weird to finally meet someone where it was like, there's something about you that just screams, I'm a victim, come eat me. It was weird. But she wanted blessings a lot. Probably, like, and it's the same thing with other members of the church, where it's like, some are like, nah, I'm never getting a blessing. I don't need it. I'm good. God hears my prayers. They're like, I don't think God's going to really care about me going to school. God's not going to care about me. They just do not ask for blessings for minor things. And then there are ones who will ask for a blessing like every week. And she was one of those, which I think was a bit too much, obviously. Because you should have a normal relationship with God. You should have a normal communication with Him for your everyday, weekly needs. But doing big things like going on missions, starting a new school year, if you're struggling with different subjects in school or in life, those are all good times to get a blessing. But I don't know. With how I was raised and with how my kids are raised, my kids aren't asking for blessings as much as I think they should, which is weird. So, and in a similar manner, Satan's the same way. Some people go overboard in saying Satan's in their life and coming after him, and there's dark spirits everywhere. And then there are people who, just like Jonah Barnes is pointing out, they're like, no problem, no Satan, no worries. And I've tended to be that way. I've been on the side of, yeah, no Satan, no worries. Like my concept for Satan for a long while has just kind of been that, he might be the tempter's voice inside us, kind of thing. It's not that he's not there, but it's much more personal, kind of like I can't say it's defined. I would articulate myself closer to what Jordan Peterson has kind of said on the matter, but it's obviously not his. Like, I've been influenced by him because I've read his books, but I can't say for sure whether he, discounts Satan altogether, but essentially the vibe is that, Satan's more of an internal construction, an internal idea, and especially on the idea of his name meaning also accuser. It's fascinating because, now that I've read in the language of Adam, if you're near the kingdom of heaven, you're about to go into the Holy of Holies, and he is there accusing you, like your own conscience accuses you of, what you've done wrong. The crap you've pulled. That internal accuser of your own conscience that's trying to tear you down is much more of a tangible, relatable understanding of the concept of how Satan works. But here's the funny thing that I've noticed with myself. I have zero experiences with any dark spirits, possessions, terrible things happening. That's just not something that's happened to me. But yet, when I hear stories of other people's experiences with it, and usually it comes from mission companions that lived outside the United States, or my wife who went and served she taught English in China and stuff. When she had experience where it was weird stuff happened, or the missionary companions told about weird stuff happening, I'll believe them. I will. But it just doesn't, it's not something that happens to me. And to me, I've always thought of it as, well, maybe I'm just blessed and lucky enough to live in a blessed and lucky land, and Lord watch over and protect me so much that I don't even have to worry about it. But it's very contradictory if you think about that, because here I'm willing to give a benefit of a doubt to other people about something that seems a lot more far-fetched because I've had zero experience with it, because it's just one of those things where I'm like, okay, I can see that. But maybe it's not because I guess I'm more accepting of other people's opinions on the matter, only because since it has not affected me directly, and their story of the bad demons, spirits, visitations, etc. being around them, or seeing how it affects others, doesn't affect me, or I'm more willing to give them a little bit of room, you know? I think that's probably the reason why. Whereas if I were in that situation, I would have probably tried to go and explore what was it that was causing that, or find a reason to justify the experience that I'm having. And so to me, it's all explainable. Like, when I lived in my in-laws' house for a brief time, she told stories about how the construction workers swore that that house was haunted. And, I mean, there's some good reasons. The way that house creaked at times, it would go from one side of the house to the other slowly. To me, it was like just a difference in pressure when the wind was blowing, you know? But there are other stories that my wife has told that she's heard in that house where it's like, yeah, that was a little more hard to believe in. But I've heard some weird stuff. But, you know, it's like, so this idea of Satan not being in the Old Testament, so to bring it back to where it's at, it's again, those two big dichotomies. One where people are like all in on Satan, and the other where, like me, I'm like, hasn't been a big deal in my life, which has made me wonder how physical him and his army is. Like, what is his place in our everyday lives? Because to me, our everyday life thing is the accusing conscientiousness that you have inside yourself of going, see, you screwed up, and I'm going to tear you down every little bit along the way. That's an everyday thing. The temptation of, hey, you don't have to do that. Which, again, it's something that feels like it comes from in ourselves. We want to ignore what we know is right because we have our heart set on something other than the gospel. Our heart is set on being more angry at our children or spouse, or we have our heart set on, I need to be right more than, you know, taking the feedback I'm getting from other people. Or my heart is more set on, I would rather go and flirt with inappropriate thoughts or ideas or movies or music than literally trying to be more chaste. Whatever it is. Like, that's more of an internal view of how Satan operates on us, instead of an external physical thing. To me, I think that's a better way of doing things, only because when you have the voice and influence of Satan coming from within you in your everyday interactions, it means that you have a better chance of controlling it. Because you're the one who can sit there and say, no, you know, I really don't. Really would prefer to be more, I would rather be righteous than indulge in this sin or bad habit. You know, I would rather try and live God's commandments, take a breath, and humbly accept feedback instead of being prideful. I would rather, you know, you have more control when you think of it more internally instead of an external source like Job being antagonistic, or the devil being antagonistic to Job from the outside. So, but I've always questioned, you know, Joseph Smith had experiences like at the first vision. I think there was another time where he prayed and had a vision of him and his angels trying to destroy people. And so I'm just like, there's parts of this that tells me there's a a kind of physical reality or metaphysical reality to Satan and his angels that I don't see as much. I don't feel that influence. But it makes me wonder, how does that work? That is a place that's completely unexplored in my theological view. And that's why it's such something that I'm like, ooh, how does that work? That I'm still willing and open to go on deep dives on. And I think it's a good subject to sit there and go, which is it? How does it work? Because the internal view, I'm all for it. 100% on board. I can see that. I've dealt with it that way. I've worked with that. But an external view, how does that work? I haven't noticed it. And maybe that's my problem. But, so, Satan's story gets passed to the Book of Mormon from the Josephite plates. So, Satan's glory days. Reading from the plates of brass, Lehi expounds on the devil. After setting the scene with our first parents and the newly named beasts, Lehi abruptly detours into the origins of Satan. He preaches that his knowledge of the devil comes from, quote, that which is written. And longer quote, and I, Lehi, according to the things which I have read, must needs suppose that an angel of God, according to that which is written, emphasis on according to that which is written, had fallen from heaven, wherefore he became a devil, having sought that which was evil before God. 2 Nephi 2:17, emphasis added. The brass plates apparently... The brass plates apparently told Lehi that the devil was once an angel of God who fell from heaven. This is not in the Old Testament. Now that he mentions it, he's right. The closest that we have is probably the New Testament with Satan grabbing a third of the host of heaven. Why? Okay. So, I can understand from the perspective of, in the language of Adam, trying to get rid of the Son and Divine Feminine to strictly go monotheistic. But why rip out references to the devil, too? Let's read on. The brass plates apparently have told Lehi that the devil was once an angel of God who fell from heaven. This is not in the Old Testament. Lehi's emphasis on the fact that he is reading from the text tells us that this is also not oral tradition or interpretation of a story he knows as liturgy. Traditional Genesis, that's a good point. He is in the liturgy of, the motions of the temple as a warning. Interesting. Okay, so he's reading from something, is what he's saying. Traditional Genesis gives no indication that Satan was once an honored angel of God. Rabbi Betzion Kravitz says Jewish scriptures do not teach that Satan is a fallen and rebellious angel. Footnote on that, why Jews cannot accept the New Testament by Rabbi Betzion Kravitz, article for Jews for Judaism. Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, that would be a bigger theological divide if they just don't accept that. Well, that's interesting. Then how, when the Book of Mormon is used to convince the Jew and Gentile together, that's a bigger divide than I thought. Anyway, let's continue. I get so excited about this stuff. The Book of Abraham, likewise, does not appear to be Lehi's source material. The closest that the New Testament comes is saying that Satan, as lightning, fell from heaven, which is Luke 10:18. We can't get from lightning to angel without squinting a little. Even then, that's as far as the New Testament goes. So did Lehi get it wrong? Well, yeah, I guess the whole dragon taking a third of the stars is even more of a stretch. That's in Revelations. So that's as far as the New Testament goes. So did Lehi get it wrong? Did Joseph Smith Jr. get it wrong? On what on the brass plates led Lehi to the idea that Satan was once an angel? Where the traditional canon is no help, the apocryphal accounts reveal This as a layup. If Lehi was reading something like the Egyptian Life of Adam and Eve, he would have heard all about Satan's previous heavenly station. Quote, "Then when God, who is merciful and full of piety, heard Adam's voice, he said unto him, O Adam, how long as the good angel was obedient to me, a bright light rested on him." Sorry, let me reread that. "O Adam, so long as the good angel was obedient to me, a bright light rested on him and his hosts. But when he transgressed my commandment, I deprived him of that bright nature, and he became dark. And when he was in the heavens, in the realms of light, he knew nothing of darkness. But he transgressed, and I made him fall from heaven onto the earth. And it was this darkness that came over him." Egyptian Life 13. Also, oh, interesting. And that's a really different way of phrasing it, too. The darkness overcame. And I don't know, there's also been kicking around in conversations in the church that, oh, this earth is the worst of all creations. We're the only ones who are really that stupid and dumb and awful and wicked to have actually destroyed their own Messiah. I'm like, okay, people have a tendency to either sit there and say, we're the best or we're the worst. We don't have anything really good to compare to. So, despite that there are visionary accounts, or there are, little allusions to the fact that we're special, in fact, of how bad we are as a world to crucify our own Savior. But at the same time, it's like, wasn't that kind of the plan from the beginning? We kind of knew how bad it would be. There is a question about whether adding Satan into the sauce has made it worse. I don't know. It's one of those weird ones. Small aside, I could go on, but there's no more point to it other than that. It's just one of those, do we really know if we're really the worst, or is it just something we assume? I'll leave the question hanging. Also, the Latin Vita Ade et Evae records Lucifer's lament. Quote, "I have been expelled from my glory, which I possessed in the heavens in the midst of the angels." Ooh, nice. In the Penitence of our forefather Adam, the Armenian manuscript, the fall of Satan, is explained. Satan also wept loudly and said to Adam, "I went forth from my dwelling, and I was alienated from the throne of the cherubs. Thereupon God became angry with me and commanded to expel us from our dwelling, to cast me and my angels who were in agreement with me to the earth." Oh, dude, I've got words on that. I will wait until the next section. Thereupon God became angry with me and commanded me, to earth. It seems the traditional Genesis isn't the standard. It's the odd one out. Like the Book of Mormon, the Apocrypha insists that Satan was a fallen angel. But this is also funny because the Catholics keep the tradition of Michael being an archangel and casting Satan from it. That's why you have Michael killing the dragon in a lot of paintings and arts and other things like that. The famous paintings of Michael the archangel, like stepping on the neck of Satan, whether he's a dragon or whether he's depicted as a man who is darkened and kind of has like sharp teeth and other little attributes to make him look more devil-like. So, even though even in the New Testament there's not much, that really came up as Christian tradition. Huh. And it's still explained that way to today. Well, the restoration during Jesus Christ's time, at least some information flowed through. Anyway, we know that Lehi had chapters of Isaiah on the brass plates, including Isaiah 14, which is the only mention of Lucifer in the entire Old Testament. The Old Testament seems far more concerned about idols or pretender gods, like Baal. Scholars say that after this light-bringer verse in Isaiah was translated from Hebrew to Greek to Latin, it morphed into Lucifer. Actually, they say, it was all just a verse about the king of Tyre, or something Dr. John Day said. The notion of the devil or Satan was a fallen angel who could also be called Lucifer shouldn't follow from Isaiah, but instead it was derived from a mistranslation in the Vulgate, or the Latin version of Isaiah. Footnote on this. Oh, it's just marking that it's from John Day's book. Michael Heiser says the figure of Isaiah 14 is clearly not a person. It's a reference to the planet Venus. I have words on this. That specifically comes from Michael Heiser's Mythological Provenance of Isaiah 14, 12 through 15, a restoration of the Ugatric material, and other generic specifics for the reference. Almost as if he had his own team of propagandists, Satan's reality is de-emphasized in the works like On the Identity of Hillel ben Shakar by William R. Gallagher, The Downfall of Hillel, the Son of Dawn, Aspects of Royal Ideology in Isaiah 14, 12 through 13 by Matthias Albani, or Lucifer, Who or What by Robert L. Alden, Ph.D. That one has a footnote. Citing alternate interpretations of the Hebrew, HLL, Alden laments the dissemination of this erroneous notion that Lucifer is Satan. He calls it a popular preservation of the beautiful name Lucifer. Oh, sorry. He calls it a popular perversion of the beautiful name Lucifer. Yeah, okay. Or my personal favorite, Don't Look Behind the Curtain. There's totally no Satan here, by Dr. Bort Screwtape. Okay, that last one was a joke. But really, is it? It's not a bad joke when it tells the truth. Holy cow. That was a great one. Oh, wow. But, like, I can see them. Oh, but I have the lens of the Book of Mormon and the Pearl of Great Price. So to me, when I can understand them, I'm very biased towards sitting there going, yeah, of course this is Satan. This is Lucifer. This is, I get it. Like, I am extremely biased in my point of view. So when they sit there and say, well, he's talking about Venus, you're like, I get it. They're talking about the difference between the great morning star and other things. And people, I've heard of that association before, so it's not total Looney Tunes. And I can see them trying to attribute it to specific people at the time, especially if you're looking through the lens where, this whole Satan thing is just crazy tradition of crazy Christians. But if you're trying to explain the writings in these things, you have to attribute it to something. So, like, I get it. I do. But, just, anyway, I find, wait a minute. Sorry, what came to mind was, if the Hebrews, before the rabbi was saying that they couldn't really accept the New Testament because they said that Lucifer was a fallen angel. By that one rabbi. But yet they have Job. So they don't deny that he's there. But they, at least according to that rabbi, don't think of him as being a fallen angel. They think that he's just... I wonder if their conception is similar to Christians then, that the idea is that Satan was created by God to help tempt us and sort us out of whether we're worthy followers of God. There's a lot of logical problems when you go down that path. So let me finish this section, because there's a lot that I wanted to go on at this. But honestly, all these scholars agree that Isaiah was merely waxing poetic about a star or a king or whatever. Anything but an actual fallen angel. The notion that the devil or Satan was a fallen angel, who could also be called Lucifer, was derived from the passage about the fall of the Shining One, son of the dawn, Hillel ben Sachar, Lucifer, in the Vulgate. Are these the same people who assure us that the Bible is translated perfectly? Because we're getting it from both sides. Lucifer is a mistake, you fools, and there are no mistakes, Satanists. This is an interesting conundrum when you're putting forward any idea, the competing voices. Let me finish this last paragraph, and then I'll go on it. While Lehi doesn't use the Latin word Lucifer at all, another great guess by Joseph Smith Jr., he absolutely asserts that Satan began as an angel of God who had fallen from heaven. So it's the brass plates versus the Old Testament again. Next section is the most awkward Thanksgiving. Okay, here's my points on this, because, again, I love the titles there. But, okay, when you put forward an idea, the reason that we get it from both sides is that there's different factions that appear to be on the same side because they work together. And I noticed this especially during 2020, when people were in the lockdowns and stuff, because this is like when WAP came out, where, yeah, it's, that Cardi B song that's really, really, really raunchy. And it was being praised as being this forward and progressive and women taking back their sexuality, which was a very, leftist thing to do. But yet at the same time, this was the point where they were really pushing the believe all women type stuff, or we were still in the middle of it, where it's like anytime that you even glance in the direction of a woman, did she give you consent kind of deal? You should, by no means ever in any way sexualize women. You pig, you dog. And it's like, how does this work if it's supposedly from the same leftist side? How is it that you can have both WAP and believe all women when they are so diametrically opposed? There is something that doesn't make sense. So to me, it's either a perception that they come from the same group, or there are different factions in that same group. So then, if there are people that do push both sides, like mainstream media was pushing both sides at the same time, then the question is, okay, how do they do the mental gymnastics to push both at the same time? Well, it comes down to, if they're doing it, what is their main goal or purpose? And so this one is not quite so just blatantly crazy as my example. This one I can see as there are the academics who say, Satan is just, tish tosh. Satan isn't real, you fools. Whereas the other side of, just general Christian, Protestant, right-hand side is that, Mormons are a cult, always talking about Satan. All those guys, that's all they talk about is Satan. It's like, I think those are actually distinctly different groups. So, they're not as, I don't think it's quite being pushed by the same side. But that's my theory on it. And even if it were on the same side, if there was one pushing once, if one person was pushing both the idea that, we're a Satanist cult because that's all we do is talk about that, and, well, I guess, as he puts it, that Lucifer is a mistake and there are no mistakes, you Satanists, if that's really being pushed by one side and one group, or a mouthpiece for both groups, then it comes down to what's their ultimate goal. Is their ultimate goal to be consistent? Because no. If it's coming from one group, it's not about being consistent. It's about pushing what agenda? That you're wrong is the agenda. You're wrong in believing this, and you need to bow to what I think and what I want. It is just manipulating, whether it is, if people use their victimhood to manipulate people, if people weaponize their feelings, if people weaponize their standards or framing the argument. There's just a myriad of different tools that all you do is leverage whatever of those tools you want to basically just say, you're wrong and I'm right, and you should bow the knee to what I want and what I say, even if the things that you espouse are contradictory. All right, so maybe I'll wait for my rant on the reason that I think the devil is so bitter and the reason behind why he's doing stuff for a little later, because I have a whole concept of that is really interesting. I think it's interesting because I made it up. Oh, no, I probably cobbled it together from a lot of other things. So, but I think it's very telling in my perspective because I haven't quite heard it. I've heard it close, but not exactly articulated the same way that I do it. Like, from Thoughtful Faith, God, what's his name? Jacob Hansen. Yeah. Like, he gets pretty close to how I articulate the reason Satan does things, or the purpose of Satan in God's plan in some ways, and how does it all fit in, because he was arguing against Alex O'Connor, and he articulates it so close, but I think he was missing one important thing. And so, it's not that the ideas that I have are completely unique or special, but I haven't heard it quite articulated the exact same. Like, there's one little bit he was missing. But I'll get into that a little later, because we haven't got into, well, why does Lucifer even part of the plan, and how does that help for or against God and such. But let's get on to the most awkward Thanksgiving. Between the Old Testament and the Book of Mormon, the Apocrypha absolutely choose a side in the argument over Satan. Not only is Satan a former angel, but he actually shares a father with Jesus in the divine investiture of St. Michael, an account of the risen Lord's sermon to his apostles. Ooh. The Lord details a bit of Satan's once glorious estate. He begins by reviewing creation, which appears to have been a joint venture. Pay attention to when it says we first created heaven, then the angels. The Father established the aeons, the first of our creations. We then brought sleep upon him. These are excerpts that are kind of skipping ahead. That's why it's done oddly. Notice how the Son and the Father co-create. Heaven? That was created by the pair. The aeons? Those were established only by the Father. Jesus joins in some creations, and others are exclusively done by the Father. Oh, the language is very precise. And when the discussion turns to Satan, Jesus calls him an angel created by my Father. Oh, interesting. So let me go over his bits that he brought. Pay attention to when it says we. First, we created heaven, then the angels. The Father established the aeons. The first of our creations, that's our. We then created. We then brought sleep upon him. Oh, interesting. Okay, so that's what he meant by those passages. Okay. The Discourses on Abaddon says roughly the same thing. Jesus calls Satan chief of the order of angels who were fashioned before Adam. A simple understanding of these passages might lead one to believe that Jesus and Lucifer share the same creator, i.e. the same Father, though our Christian brothers and sisters may not like it. Two sons who share a father are traditionally called brothers. This doesn't mean that they are eating Thanksgiving dinner together, but it does mean that they both called or call Elohim Father. So Lehi gets the origin of Satan right, and the Apocrypha go one step further by showing that Satan and Jehovah share the same Father. I guess that was always one thing, like, in my lens of being a Latter-day Saint, it's never been an issue to me. To me, it was like, well, everyone was kind of like an angel up there. And so, well, yeah, Satan was just kind of like one of us till he decided to rebel against God. So, what's the problem? But I guess in generic Christianity, when I remove myself from my lens and try and slide in generic Christian, when I look at the Genesis stuff that they talk about, they have interesting concepts about like the different levels of angels versus humans, and like where are we on the scheme of things versus, well, then there's angels and archangels and then there's these demons and lesser demons. Like they have this whole hierarchy, and they also view it almost as if they're different species, like that they are all different kind of things. Like there's a difference between a cherubim and a seraphim, and there's a difference between this type of angel or this type of divine being or this thing or that thing, and they make them sound like completely different things. Whereas in the Church of Jesus Christ, our understanding is very much more along the lines of, yeah, cherubim and seraphim, they're basically symbolically a little different. But generally it means the spirits of, either people or animals or things created. And symbolically, these are these things with wings and all this other stuff. But in general, we view it a lot more homogeneous. That instead of having all these different, like, species of divine things, I've always thought of, angels are just people either before or after their life working as messengers for God. So, creatures that have 1,000 eyes and stuff, like, that's all the symbolic thing. For us, it's just like, okay, they're the divine beings and undivine supernatural things like devils and demons are all, to me, part of the same group. They're spirits of people like us, either acting as messengers before or after their death, or having chosen in the pre-earth life to follow Satan. So for the devils and other bad supernatural stuff, it's just, again, more of us, but rebelling and following Satan. Or the divine beings from Genesis and all these other places is just more of us, but acting as messengers in different roles. And so I can see why it weirds generic Christians out. That Satan is Jesus' brother kind of thing. If you're viewing these angelic and divine beings as being completely different, like species, basically, it'd be like saying that this fish is an elephant's brother. Ha! Look at those guys; they're so moronic. It's like, yeah, I can get their point when they come through that lens, but I guess that comes down to that lens that's informed by what isn't in the Old Testament. The impious impetus for the insurrection. Here's where I'm going to have a lot to say, I'm sure, at the end. Not only does Lehi tell us that the height from which Satan fell seems to tell us when. Sorry, my nose, it's killing me. Not only does Lehi tell us the height from whence Satan fell, he seems to tell us when, at the end of creation and before the fall. First, Adam and Eve are created. They name the fauna and receive that they should act for themselves. 2 Nephi 2:14-16. Creation is all but finished when Lucifer rebels in verse 17, right in time to tempt Eve in verse 18. First creation, then rebellion, then the fall. It could just be looked over as simply Lehi's own paraphrasing, if it didn't line up perfectly with so many other recently discovered accounts. The creation accounts of the Book of the Cave of Treasures, the Discourse on Abaddon, and the Divine Investiture of St. Michael all corroborate Lehi's timeline. Satan's rebellion is necessarily after the creation of the beasts, and because of their adoration for Adam. Satan's rebellion is necessarily after the creation of the beasts and because of their adoration for Adam. Really? Because the animals adore Adam, Satan's envious. Envy of Adam is why Lucifer becomes jealous, prideful, and ultimately starts a rebellion. Whoa, this is way different than my conception, so let's find out. I'll tell you my conception at the end of what and the reason why Lucifer rebelled. It has more to do with the Book of Abraham kind of stuff. But anyway, envy of Adam is why he becomes jealous, prideful, and ultimately starts rebellion. In the Divine Investiture of St. Michael, Lucifer tells the Father, "I will not worship him, for he is a man, and I am before him, and I am the greatest of all the angels." Again, it's one of these things where that seems to set angels distinctly apart from men and humankind as kind of a different species altogether. But in the Discourse on Abaddon, the angel Lucifer has the same complaint, and he, being of great pride, drew himself up in a shameless manner, and said, "It is meet that this man Adam should come and worship me, for I existed before he came into being." Oh, yeah, okay. So, in my conception of us all being more homogenous, that one makes more sense, because there is an inherent desire of, I'm older, I should get more respect. The pecking order, and he wanted to establish it. The Book of the Cave of Treasures describes Satan as jealous of Adam from that day, and he did not wish to worship him. Lucifer complains, "It is meet that ye should worship me, because I am fire and spirit, and not that I should worship a thing of dust, which hath been fashioned of fine dust." The revolt of Satan and the battle of heaven. Interesting. Fine dust. I wonder how ancient people had no concept of atomic theory. So it's interesting that he calls it fine dust. I mean, Adam did live quite long, but anyways, still dust. In the Egyptian retelling of the fall story, Satan admits it was Adam's creation that catalyzed his rebellion. "When thou wast formed, I was hurled out of the presence of God and banished from the company of angels." Really? Similarly, the Tales of the Prophets, an Islamic compendium of apocryphal stories, says that Iblis, Satan, refused to be those who prostrate before Adam. Iblis defines Allah, saying, "I'm better than Adam. You created me from fire, and him you created from clay." It was because of his objection to what Lucifer saw as the unearned dominion of Adam that the angel fell from heaven. That's why Satan's rebellion needed to fit between creation and the fall. The old Slavonic creation of the heavens and the earth gets this right too, placing the rebellion of Sotanael and his first fallen demons right towards the end of creation, but before the fall. Sorry. Lehi gets the order of creation right and places the heavenly rebellion precisely where it should be, which also implies why it occurred in reaction to the angels paying homage to Adam. This is really interesting. Okay, there are two footnotes that I've overlooked. The first one was, you created me from fire, and him you created from clay. That's Quran 7:12. The reoccurring theme of Satan hating flesh is fascinating. Is this where the familiar loathing of the flesh comes from? That's interesting. That's very interesting too. From ancient Judaism to Platonism, see Plato's Allegory of the Cave, to Christianity, the mortal body has been maligned as a prison of the spirit. Spiritual things are always praised above carnal things. Joseph Smith Jr. preached the opposite. Spiritual and physical are the same thing, the former finer than the other. Incarnation is greater than being a spirit. We rejoiced when our mortal realm was fashioned. Job 38:7. The earth is a glorious creation. Ultimately, God himself has a body of flesh and bones as tangible as man's. The Son also, Doctrine and Covenants 130:22. But Satan seems to always have had an envy of flesh, claiming that being made of fire is better than clay. The other footnote was the first fallen demons right towards the end of creation, but before the fall. That's Pelea Tokovaya. The first fallen demons who fell into the underworld are now deaf, and ever since have not known anything in the world. Oh, interesting. Okay, so this is actually very informative. My conception of Satan's fall is quite different from these sources. So this is something I need to explore more and see how it fits in with my conceptualization of these ideas. Because here is how I see Satan's fall. My conception was that Satan would have rebelled while he was in the council of heaven. That's pretty indefinite of a timeline. Because to me, I always thought that we counseled beforehand, saying, okay, well, here's the whole plan. We're all gathered together. Here's the whole plan. Who am I going to send? Jesus says, here I am, send me. And then Satan says, well, here I am, send me. I've got a better plan. And followed by which God's like, nah, we're going to go with Jesus because he actually wants to follow my plan. And your plan just doesn't work, and kicks him out. Now, that, to me, places it before kind of like the earth was created. But it's kind of indefinite. If it is that Satan would have fallen after the creation, but before the fall, that can also very much make sense, because creation happens, everyone's cool with it, everyone's like, okay, here's the plan. Let's counsel together. Earth is created. We're about to get down there. We're going to get this ball rolling one way or another. The motivation is entirely different. The motivation is entirely different. Let me go through everything that I thought, everything that I understand that Jonah Barnes just thought, and then I'll try and mess it together. Here's what I thought. I thought that before the creation even started, we had the council. That everyone understood that the plan was, look, we're going to create this mortal realm. We're going to go through this mortal realm. It's going to suck. It's not going to be good. It's not going to be just. We are all going to sin. We're all going to fall. It's all going to be bad. But it's important to do so that way you can actually learn good from evil for yourself and be more like Heavenly Father. We are going to need a Savior, and that means someone who is willing to do literally everything that God is, was, and would do, and also would be willing to take the punishment for everyone eternally, all the punishment, so that way he can cleanse us and he can pull us back into the presence of God. So all that's laid out. Everyone knows that this is God's plan, not their own. And then when he says, all right, who are we going to have as a Savior? Jesus says, send me, and your will be done, and all the glory is yours. But Satan then pipes up and says, no, send me, but let me have the glory because I have a better plan. Because instead of making it so that there's a lot of people here that aren't going to make it, because we know how terrible it's going to be, and we know that not all of us are great, how about I do it, but I save everybody? I have a better plan. My plan is to make sure that everybody gets back, and there's no problem with it. Then everyone is safe, and everyone can be fine. And God goes, no, that doesn't work. And Satan's like, well, fine. Flips the table. And God's like, all right, get out of here. But here's the details of that interaction, which I think is explicitly important to understand. My point of view of it was the following, that Satan was trying to take away the agency of people. You know, that's what God calls out Satan for. He says, look, your plan doesn't work because you're trying to take away the agency of people. The only way you can have everyone come back 100% is that if you make them do what is right. They have no free will and they have no choice. And that is not okay. That will not work. So the big question is, well, why not? Why doesn't it work? Why can't we just be automatons doing what is right and return to God and get glory and be like, there's kind of a Christian idea of, well, God created us. He could have created us in any way. Then the anti-theists, the atheists, geez, come back and say, well, why didn't he just make us like automatons and have us all come back in glory? Why give us suffering? Well, here's the important thing. God didn't create us without agency because there is no other way to do it. My conception is this. God was restrained not because our God's a weak God, but because it's literally the only way to do something. You can't have a square circle. It just fundamentally doesn't work. If you want somebody to become like God, because we didn't know good from evil for ourselves, and more importantly, not only was that the most important step in our progression, to know good from evil for ourselves, but to choose good for ourselves instead of evil. If we are automatons, and we are forced to do nothing but good, have we proved ourselves? No, we haven't. We've just been an automaton. That does not create someone who is divine and righteous on their own, that they of themselves choose and do good. It does not produce that. You cannot separate the idea of we are children of God, and if we're going to become like him, well, one of the attributes of God is that he is good on his own, that he chooses to do good, to do the best, and always be all these divine attributes. That is like the emphasis of who he is. If we are to be like him, we have to do the same, which is we have to show the universe that we are willing to choose and be good and do good on our own. And if we don't do that, if we are forced, then what's the point? There is no point. That is why it cannot happen. You cannot take away the agency of man to get a result of this person here. See, Brother Barnes has chosen to do what is right on his own volition when it was against everything that he wanted. It would have been easier to go down the simple path. It was easier to go down and do something wrong or engage in his hedonism and tear the tags off the mattresses. But he chose to do what was right. You know, and to me, yeah, he's not going to be perfect. I'm not going to be perfect. Nobody's going to be perfect. But the idea is that when given enough information, when we have enough opposing ideas of both suffering and joy, of both terribleness and goodness, that we for ourselves get to say, yeah, no, this plan and all these commandments, they help me to be good, and I should choose good, and I should choose good just for the purpose of being good. Not because I'm told to, not because I'm afraid of punishment, not because I'm worried about this, but just because it is the right thing to do. When we become more like that, that shows our divinity, that shows our potential, and that makes us real children of God, is because we have chosen, despite all opposition, to do what's right. And I think Satan was worried. I think he didn't like it. I think that he was like, no, this is way too risky. 1 in 50 is still too risky. That's phrase from our D&D group. There's like a 1 in 50 chance that something bad would happen, and he still had it happen. So Satan was like, 1 in 50 is still too risky. I want to get everyone there. Why do we have to go through this? He was basically going along the lines of saying, well, kind of like the atheists, well, why didn't God just create us to have no agency so that he could elevate us and make us divine but the thing is that it just couldn't happen. I think Satan realized that God could make or do anything, but he didn't understand or appreciate the restraints on the logical fallacy of how do you make someone, how do you prove that someone would be good on their own? I don't think he appreciated that argument. I think he just wanted everyone to return and be elevated divinely, but he either didn't understand or he didn't care. Or he thought it was just like, well, that's just not fair, you know? And so he decided to rebel and say, well, screw you. And so when he comes down and tempts Eve, my idea was that he did so because he's like, you know what? I'm going to prove God wrong. I'm going to tempt Eve, I'm going to get this ball rolling, and I'm going to make a mess of everything and show him how stupid his idea was. That's how I viewed it all. And see, when the part that I haven't seen in other people's articulation of this, why do we suffer here? And why is it necessary that we came down to go through this suffering? Is the concept that we must have our own agency to prove to the universe, to God, that we will choose what is right on our own. Because fundamentally, if we do not have that agency, and therefore we have to have the diametrically opposed choices, including suffering and injustice, to show that despite even the whole world and universe stacked against us, we will still choose what's right. You know, that explains that, you know, why do we have to go through all this bad stuff? It's because it's to prove that we will choose good. That's like the one part that just didn't seem to show up on Thoughtful Faith. He got it so close. He said almost everything other than that little bit. And to me, that falls in place wonderfully. But now here comes Jonah Barnes, wrecking all my joyous theories about how this all goes. And that his whole point was to, you know, he was just jealous of Adam. He didn't think Adam should have honor. And so here's what I understand that the Apocrypha is apparently saying, is that everything gets created, world gets made, Adam gets formed, animals get named, so we're pretty darn far. And followed by which, then everyone's like, why should we give deference to Adam? You know, he's this corporeal thing made of dust. Well, I'm this great spirit. I'm just, why? Why should I have to do that? I don't know. That one doesn't make as much sense for me. Because my conception so far has always been a theological, a philosophical argument of how do we get everybody to return? Because it's going to be risky down there. To me, that makes perfect sense. This idea that he's just jealous because, you know, why do I have to bow down to Adam? Is jealousy. Hey, I was made before Adam. I wonder if that's another thing that he did. I wonder if there was a council and he says, well, send me, I have a better idea. And then Adam gets made and he's like, what? We should bow to this chump. We should give this chump honor. I was made before him. I had a better idea. I was going to save everybody. But no. We're gonna. I wonder if, here I am trying to blend it already, but the idea is, from what I understand, is that everything gets made just before the fall. Satan gets jealous of Adam. And that's the impetus for his fall. Because he's prideful and jealous. But to me, I've always thought of Satan as being reasonable in his... And what I mean by reasonable is reasonable in his understanding of things. Unreasonable in his emotional reactions, but reasonable in his thought process. That there's something mentally that you can sit there and go, oh yeah, I can see what he's talking about. I can agree with that. This is why I should follow these problematic and terrible things. There's something that should be able to be convincing about his arguments. And that's why so many people would follow him. That's how I've always viewed him. But the idea of just him being jealous and that being a fall never sat well with me. And that's why these apocryphal ideas of him just being jealous because Adam got to go down first, be clothed in flesh and bones, and that we should give reverence to him, because, I mean, he's the start of it all, at least here on this world, then it's like, I don't know. That doesn't sit right completely with me. So it makes me wonder what the, what could be the blend here. I'm wondering if Satan proposed his plan in the council, hey, I can save everybody, and he gets rejected, and then Adam he gets breath of life, names the animals, and he's like, seriously? We're going with this. We're doing this stupid thing, and you think that this is a good idea. And then his emotional side takes over his reasoning, that he's, table flipping, right? He's just like, screw it. And he's like, I'm going to show you how bad your idea is. I think that still fits in my conception of things. But I'm informed by the Book of Abraham and temple liturgy that the idea of him proposing that he's going to save everyone and take away the agency of man, and that his jealous, but how could that be compatible with, the only way I could think of that as being compatible with apocryphal stuff from Jonah Barnes here is that he was angry that this plan of coming to mortality with being able to truly, freely choose is a stupid and bad idea. And he wants to prove that he's right by wrecking the other plan. And so it's like, no, I'm not going to bow down to Adam. I'm not going to bow down to this idea. This is a terrible... I'm wondering if that would be compatible. I'll have to leave it up in the air. But that's how I'm going to join it together. Is I'm going to say, okay, if it's because Satan just got jealous because Adam was getting deference and honor, whereas he was made earlier and he was just jealous, that really makes him very, very petty. And maybe that is the way he is. Maybe he is just petty. And on some levels, that's kind of what he shows, is that he's petty. And the ideas and if that translates into how we relate with one another, all our pettiness is really just a spirit of Satan, then, okay, kind of get it. I kind of get it. But, I don't know. I think it's more complete to have the idea that he didn't want... I think it's more complete to have the idea that we must have agency to show that we can be like Father in heaven by choosing righteousness on our own. I think that's one key point. Whether Satan was trying to take away that agency because he wanted to be glorified because he was petty, or he wanted to be glorified because he wanted to change the status quo, do something better, and then he starts table flipping whether that's beforehand because he proposed his plan to save everyone and it was rejected because it's just fundamentally opposed to the idea of that doesn't accomplish anything, because if everyone's an automaton, that doesn't give them any glory. That's literally just giving one person glory because you're the one who got everything done. But it screws everybody else over. But no, they'd be divine beings. Yeah, but are they really? They weren't the ones who actually made the choice for themselves. Sorry, that's one conception that I have that's really important to me because it makes sense of so much. But how the pettiness of Satan works in and how does that affect us, that's a totally different ball of wax. I'm trying to figure out how much of the, well, I guess incorporeal nature of Satan actually affects us, and how does it interact with us? How much of an influence does he have on corporeal, regular matter? How does it influence us, or is it really all internal voices of, ignore God, or give in to your hedonism, or place your own desires above that which is God's? Or does he have more of an actual physical presence of, he causes pain, and he causes suffering, and he causes bad things to happen? That's one of those weird things that I don't have a full, developed conceptual idea for. But his pettiness is an interesting one. Because is it just because he's jealous and petty of Adam? Could be. Is that a kind of last straw thing where he was jealous and petty because he wanted to be elevated above even God and Jesus Christ, and then he was rejected, and so the last straw was Adam being made, and so he's like, screw it, I'm gonna just, either way it all works together. It just shows that it shows the pettiness and jealousness of Satan, which I think is kind of a key understanding of who he is. Sorry, I'm kind of musing on this, I'm mulling it over, but to me the important part is I've always conceptualized Satan as having a thoughtful reason, but a petty emotional side. Whereas in this, it seems much more of just straight up pettiness and short-sightedness. So it's not a good forethought or forethinking. Nothing that's really justifiable. I mean, technically you could make the argument that the idea of, hey, let's take away everyone's agency and just force them to do what is right is also very short-sighted and just is like, just give me glory, I know better than God, kind of stuff. But it's one of these things to mull over. I mean, sorry, this is a mark of a good book, is when it challenges what you already know, or makes you start thinking and reconsidering everything that you know because of more information. And this is one of those key things. I knew this was a subject where I didn't have fully formed ideas. And so now that I have more information about just Satan becoming jealous because Adam got more glory than him, because he was the first man and other things like that, it adds to it. How is that going to change? Well, you can see that I've gone from thinking of him as this reasonable mastermind with a pettiness that made him flip the table, to considering that maybe he was really just more petty and short-sighted than I considered. And so, we'll see. We'll see. This is one of those things where there's a lot more information that I feel like I could be informed on. So I hope as I keep reading chapter 2, I get more and it helps solidify things more. I can't wait to see what Jonah Barnes has continued to uncover. Love you, Pa. We'll see ya.